So, dear friends, I thought that on the last night I'd give you a 4-hour talk to see if you had the endurance that this trip surely has grown in you. But I can only give you a taste, which I'm sure is a huge relief to you after all the wild excesses that we've enjoyed together. But I want to give you a taste of the greatest secret of all. Because it's knowing this great secret that is going to give humanity the guts, the passion, the stamina to go through what is going to be the most terrible, the most utterly transformative period of our history. Look, let's just put it absolutely out there. We are in a massive evolutionary crisis, which is going to determine whether or not we survive at all, or whether or not the world goes on at all. And this evolutionary crisis is now reaching critical quantum point. And what is most essential to understand about this evolutionary crisis is that it is not a transformation, it is a mutation. Transformations leave you a better version of yourself. Mutations create a wholly new species. And if you want 2 examples of a mutation so that you can really fix it in your heart mind, let's imagine 100 million years ago when the seas were becoming toxic and a few really crazy fish leapt out of the water onto dry land and leapt into a totally unfamiliar atmosphere and gasped on burning sand. And many, 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 many of them died on that burning sand. But there were those who trusted beyond reason, gave themselves completely to this totally terrifying, unbelievable new experience. And guess what? Over time, fish became birds. That's what a mutation looks like. If you want another example from nature, think of what happens to a caterpillar. A caterpillar at a certain time, and actually some caterpillars say, no, I'm not going to go through this process, I'll just be a caterpillar roaming around and eating leaves. But there are some caterpillars, a lot of caterpillars, who decide that through these strange stirrings within them, they're going to follow an ancient law, and they spin a cocoon around themselves. And you know what happens in that cocoon? They completely dissolve. They totally and absolutely dissolve. Every caterpillariness in them dissolves into a gray, mysterious soup. And through the miracle of the evolutionary will of the Divine Mother, in that soup wake up what are called imaginal cells. Can you imagine scientists having the illumination to call them imaginal cells? Imaginal cells. And over time they cluster together and they form a wholly new creature, a butterfly who is as different from a caterpillar as a Learjet is from a bicycle. And then at the right moment, that butterfly within the cocoon goes through a titanic struggle, which it has to go through because it has to develop the strength of its wings, and it breaks through that cocoon and it flies off as a completely new creature. That's what's happening right now in the world. And that's why what's happening is so ferocious, so terrifying, so frightening, so nakedly confronting on every single level. because it is absolutely clear to anyone who has half a mind and half a brain and a third of a heart that humanity as it is can only commit mass suicide. One kind of humanity is already over in the heart mind of the mother. And what she has done is to use all of our dark, slavish emotions, all of our greed, all of our hubris, to let us spin a cocoon around us in which we are going to dissolve as we are. And in that cocoon, the great secrets that have been kept hidden in the heart of the mystical traditions, the secret of the potential of the birth of an embodied divine humanity, the secrets that have been kept at the heart of Kabbalah, of Shaivism, of the great Christian mystical tradition, of the real Kashmiri Shaivite Tantric tradition, at the heart of the Vedic tradition, they are all waiting. They are all waiting. And some of us who are crazy enough have spent a lifetime excavating these secrets and trying with all of our flaws and follies to live them so that we can say to you they are real, they exist, they're true, they are truly transformative, and they're truly mutating. None of us know the end of this process. We only know the beginning of this process. Because a fish, as its organs start to evolve, these strange new organs that will become birds, don't know at the beginning of that evolution what is going to happen to them. But they do know that something absolutely amazing, unparalleled, extraordinary, beyond any kind of reason or thought is going on. So that's where we are. The secret of secrets is hidden in these two texts from the Rig Veda, the original scriptures of India. And the Rig Veda is the core revelation at the heart of India, the supreme gift of India to the world. Because the Rig Veda did not, like the later Upanishads and the later evolutions of high Hindu metaphysics, stress transcendent escape from this world, moksha, liberation. They were after something far, far more dangerous, more difficult, more wonderful, more miraculous. They were after the transfiguration of the human into the divine human through a complete mutation of matter into divine matter. And the great discovery of this secret hidden at the core of the Vedas was made by the supreme evolutionary philosopher of the last 1,000 years, Sri Aurobindo, who knew that this mutation process was happening in him. And because of his immense learning, plunged deep into the Vedas and found in the Vedas the key of keys, and found the key of keys in the two passages that I am going now to read to you. Everything is in these passages. Don't listen to them with the mind. And don't listen to them with your experiences of floating off into another reality. Listen to them with the burning memory of those times when your whole being was lit up with a flame of union with reality, when you were making love so passionately to someone who loved you passionately that you melted, the body melted, everything melted, the world melted. Listen to them with the memory of being in one of these crazy streets in Banaras when all of your resistance were burned away and suddenly the horns were sounding in you. You were moving like a dancer through the chaotic dance all around you, and your whole body, your whole mind, your whole heart, your whole soul were one with everything that was happening inside you. Listen, because those are the signs of the birth of a being who is unified, heart, mind, soul, and body. And with those memories, those signs alive in you, listen to these stupendous, majestic, pioneering texts. Our fathers, through their mantra, broke the strong and refractory places. By their cry, they shattered into pieces the rock of the mountain. They made in us a passage to the great heaven. They discovered the sun that lived in the darkness. They found the treasure of heaven hidden in the secret cave like a fledgling bird. They found the treasure in the infinite rock. The fecund mountain split in two, delivering the supreme birth. And then in truth they awoke and they saw totally with all the eyes of their body. They saw behind them, around them, and everywhere, and lived in truth the same ecstasy that is enjoyed in heaven. They discovered the well of honey covered by the rock. I'm going to interpret that passage, and then I'm going to read it to you again so that its transmission can come burning into your cells and that you can carry that imprint with you as you go through the chaos of her great will to birth a new species on this planet. Our fathers, through their mantra, the fathers, the great Vedic fathers and mothers, knew that mantra contained all the powers necessary to do this great transfiguration process, because mantra is vibration at its most intense and focused. And the whole universe is created by the marriage of vibration and light. Light energy. Light energy is shaped and formed by vibration. This is how the divine creates. And in giving humanity the great key of the mantra, humanity was given the key to the transfiguration of the mind, of the heart, of the soul, and at last and amazingly, the body, the rock in these texts. Our fathers, through their mantra, broke the strong and refractory places. By their cry, they shattered into pieces the rock of the mountain. What does that text mean by the cry? You have got to get to the place that the fish on the burning sand got to. What do you think they felt when they leapt out of that toxic, disgusting sea, out of the toxic, disgusting sea of the samsara that we've created by our hubris, our madness, our cruelty, our insanity, our selfishness, our lack of compassion? What do you think they felt? They felt terrified, and they cried out from the depths of their being to be saved, to break through, to be redeemed, to be transformed. And nothing in this great evolutionary process is going to happen simply by sitting on your comfortable sofa and doing a few mantras and reading a few books by some wretched New Age author who doesn't know anything about anything. Nothing is going to be accomplished by that, because what's needed for this great transfiguration process is a vast cry, a cry to end the slavery to a consciousness that is now obviously suicidal and matricidal on every single level. And if you can't see it now, there's no hope for you, because everything in our world is burning with the agony that suicidal and matricidal consciousness cannot help but create. So we have to find that cry. You have to find that cry. And it's that cry that the burning fish had that will call down the grace, the wild and holy transfiguring grace that will then put you through the mutation process. They made in us, through this working with the mantra and through the keeping up of this boiling wild holy cry to be transfigured, they made in us a passage. They dug deep in the core of our rotten humanity, and they found this passage to the great heaven, to the great light. They discovered the sun that lived in the darkness. It's easy to discover the sun that lives in the heavens. It's easy even to discover the divine light that transcends everything, from which everything is created. But the mutation that you and I are now asked to go on is a mutation that will require discovering the sun in the darkness of matter, in the rock, in the bed of that darkness. And one of the prophetic signs of this mutation was the splitting of the atom and the releasing of momentous power that happened in 1945. But typical of us, we did it externally, and then for destructive, selfish purposes, instead of doing the great work with the mantra and with the cry to dive down into the depths of the darkness of matter and do it there, so that cells themselves could reveal that behind their shrouding by ignorance and imbecilic obedience to death, there lay a sun which could engolden them. They found the treasure of heaven hidden in the secret cave like a fledgling bird. They found that when they dug deep with the mantra and the cry into the very depths of their bodies, into the depths of the matter from which they were made, into the final cellular structures of their quarks and neutrinos, through the mantra and the cry, they found that in that murky, impenetrable seeming depth, in the depths of the cave of that depth, there was a fledgling bird, a new creature, a new species, waiting to fly, waiting to own a wholly new world. And they called this the treasure in the infinite rock. So the path that they're describing is not a path of transcending this world. It's a path of arriving completely in the core of this world, to discover at the core of the core of the core of this world, a burning solar, all-transfiguring energy that could transfigure mind, heart, soul, and body and birth a wholly new species. And in the second chunk, glowing, majestic, diamond-lit chunk of the Vedas, you have the description of what this new consciousness is like. And from what little I know of it, and I do know through the grace of God and through the grace of Kabir, whom I'm going to share his 4 great poems of engoldenment, I do know that this is true. This is what they told us. The fecund mountain, the rock that seems so impenetrable, is really a birth-giving mother. It's split in two, the atoms split in two, the cells split in two, the whole rock splits in two and delivers the supreme birth. And the supreme birth is not the birth of a consciousness that allows you to transcend everything, drop the body, drop the world, go into eternity. That's not the supreme birth, that's the second supreme birth. It's number 2, it's 101. It's what you need to experience before you do this terrible, amazing work. The supreme birth is the birth of a new species, a new consciousness, a new way of knowing, a new way of being, a new completeness and fullness and transfigured ecstasy of direct human divine presence. And this is what they said. Then, in all truth, they awoke, and they saw totally. That's such an astounding phrase. They saw totally, because their whole body became eyes. This detail is repeated in the secret texts of the real secret traditions. For example, Saint Macarius of the 3rd century, who lived the transfiguration process, says your whole body becomes eyes. So you're seeing that, you're seeing that, you're seeing that, you're seeing that, you're seeing the past, you're seeing the future, you're seeing everything with one single, present, embodied, divine, human sight. They saw totally, behind them, around them, and everywhere, and lived in truth. The same ecstasy that is enjoyed in heaven. They didn't wait for moksha to rejoice. They didn't wait to drop the body to dance in ecstasy with the eternal light. They found the solar eternal light in the depths of the body, and they lived in a full embodied divine human, utterly present, utterly grounded ecstasy right now, right here. They discovered the well of honey covered by the rock. That's the key to the mutation of the human into the divine human. It is all there. And through history, there have been fish who have turned into birds as signs that this mutation of the human into the divine human is not a fantasy, is not a poetic dream, is not something the desperate people seeing humanity going towards an immense suicide had to concoct to be able to bear the agony of what they were seeing. We have had a very few people on the earth who lived as radiant birds and radiant butterflies. And you're in the city right now where one of the very greatest of those birds and butterflies lived his absolutely naked and revolutionary and totally free and totally radical divine human life. Kabir in the 15th century, who left us the record of what it is to be this new being, free of religion, free of caste, free of tradition, free of the desire to humiliate and dominate the body, free of an addiction to transcendence, able to live in transcendent ecstasy in the core of ordinary, extraordinary, miraculous life, in the core of the illumined, transfigured body. And I spent 5 years in a cabin in Arkansas with my mind blown by what I was being graced to discover. And that's what I'm offering at the end of our time to you. But before I read 4 of his greatest poems coming from his experience of the treasure in the rock, I want to tell you of the most important conversation that I've had on this earth with the most important person that I've met on this earth, my beloved Father Bede Griffiths, who was the great revolution in my life. Not only was Bede a great saint, he was also a great prophet, but even more importantly, he was a humble, loving, vibrant, simple pioneer of the transfiguration process. He knew that this mutation was happening in his 80s to him, and on one amazing afternoon, he told me what was going on. And it happened like this, and I want to give you the 2 conversations that are constellate in one that led up to this 3rd conversation, so you will know that what I'm saying to you is not something I invented in the bath. It's something that comes from those who know what's going on. In the morning of this amazing day, I came in, and it was the last day of the filming of the film that I made with an Australian film director and a very wacky Australian film crew about his life, and they hadn't turned up. And I was alone with him in his hut, and we were sitting in rapture and joy together, because whenever we were together there was this unbelievable rapture of love, the purest, highest, wildest, sweetest love I've never known on this earth. He was my beloved. And he said, "You know, Andrew, we have reached the hour of God." And I said, because I've been trained in Oxford snottiness, I said, "What do you mean by the hour of God?" But I'm so glad I asked that, because what he gave me was the map for what's happening. He said, "Look here, Andrew, we will have to choose between suicide or adoration. We will have to choose between a mass self-destruction and the destruction of the whole of nature, and a commitment at the most radical level to divinize ourselves through the intensest imaginable devotion to God." And there are 3 possibilities for humanity now. One is that humanities wake up, fall on its knees, beg for redemption, and this crisis will be averted, and that's highly unlikely. The second is that humanity will continue in its insane blindness and destroy itself and a whole part of nature very soon, within the next 25 or 30 years. And he was speaking in 1993. And then he smiled, and then he said, "But this is not what I think and hope and pray will happen, because the God that I have met in the depths of my mystical experience is a God of infinite love, infinite joy, and infinite miraculous possibility. So then he leant back and he said, what's going to happen, I believe, is that humanity is going to go through the most terrifying global dark night. And it's going to think that everything is ending. It's going to have to think that because it's got to rubble its insane vanity. But it's not going to be destroyed. It's going to be utterly remade. And the real meaning, he said, of the second coming is not that Jesus is going to return in some kind of Star Wars movie, but that the golden yeast of the Christ consciousness is going to rise in hundreds of thousands of people. And that instead of it being one person who goes through the process into transfiguration, a whole slew of human beings, reduced almost to rubble by the agony of the process, but inspired by the devotion they keep burning through the process, they are going to be Christed. And we're going to have on the earth a wholly new species. So that was the morning. Can you imagine? So I recovered, trying to take in what he'd given me, because if you knew Bede was incapable of exaggeration and incapable of lying, and the most sincere, the clearest, the most completely sober being I've ever known. And after lunch I came in and I said, look, I want to take you to your meditation hut. You've talked to me about your hut, I've never seen it, and I would love it if you did me and the crew the honor of allowing me to ask you a few questions when you're in your meditation hut. And he said, I think 3:30 would be about the right time. And what happened is that we went to his meditation hut, which was crumbling with this old cot surrounded by straggly leaves in the middle of this burning golden field. And he lay down, this glorious 86-year-old man whose skin was gold and who emitted light. And I'm not exaggerating, he was quite clearly radiant with divine light. And he leant back on that bed, and I said, what is really going on in you? And he looked at me and he said, okay, what's happened is that 3 years ago I had a heart attack. I was 83, I was on the veranda, and I was hit from the left, and I thought I was going to die. And I prepared myself to die. But instead of dying, what happened was that I was invaded by an immense force of divine love. And I cried out, I'm being invaded by the Mother. And what that set up in me was a process unlike anything that I have ever experienced before. And I've been graced with the classical enlightenment experiences. I know the light. I have seen the eternal light. I know that I'm in my core deathless. I know the classic experiences. They've happened to me through grace. But this is a completely new process. And I said, and what does this feel like? And he says, what it feels like is that a light is coming through the top of my skull, through the Sahasrara, and is pouring down, and is opening my consciousness completely, and is opening my heart completely, and is going down into the depths of my sex center, into the depths of my body, and it keeps flowing, keeps keeps flowing, unifying heart, mind, soul, and body in a way that I cannot possibly describe, but that I know is unifying me with reality in a way that I have no words for, but that I am supremely grateful for. That is the treasure in the rock. So with that background, I just want to read you 4 of Kabir's poems that come from the same experience. Once you're given the key by the Vedas and by someone who really you love and trust, who tells you the truth of what's happening in them to make them the utterly free, magnificent being that they are, you cannot miss it. And that is what Kabir's poetry is ultimately celebrating. The ecstatic freedom of those who have discovered that they can be turned to gold. So let me share these poems with you, because they are the greatest mystical poems that anyone has ever written, because they come from the highest and deepest and most grounded and most exalted place. And they have exactly the tone that you heard in the Vedas, that ecstatic tone, but that totally gritty, grueling, fierce, grounded tone. That's how you can tell. Anybody who's been anywhere near the transfiguration process is not going to tell you that it's easy, is not going to tell you that you can get it in a few weekends and a Sanskrit name and dancing to Deva Pramal. It's not going to be like that. It's a discovery of a wholly new way of being. But the rapture and the beauty and the gratitude and the awe and the amazement that you have if you take this journey are worth any of the ordeals that you have to go through to begin to understand it. So here is Kabir. And this is for all of you who've been on this amazing journey with me. Thank you. The beloved is in me, and the beloved is in you, as life is hidden in every seed. So rubble your pride, my friend, and look for him within you. When I sit in the heart of his world, a million suns blaze with light, a burning blue sea spreads across the sky, life's turmoil falls quiet, all the stains of suffering wash away. Listen to the unstruck bells and drums. Love is here. Plunge into its rapture. Rains pour down without water. Rivers are streams of light. How could I ever express how blessed I feel to revel in such vast ecstasy in my own body? This is the music of soul and soul meeting, of the forgetting of all grief. This is the music that transcends all coming and going. That's a poem about the birth, when the mountain splits in two and delivers the supreme birth. That is the birth singing its amazement at being born wholly divine and wholly human. So listen. The beloved is in me. In me. In me. And the beloved is in you. And then he gives a totally natural image, which really gives us the key, as life is hidden in every seed. What we are now is the seed of the next humanity. And we have to be split open by this mantric work and this cry so that the tree of our embodied divinity can come out. And what that requires is the abandonment of any kind of concept and dogma about the spiritual path that we've ever been told by people who have only taken half of the path, not the full path. Half of the path is the path to transcendence. The full path is coming with that transcendent consciousness and uniting mind, heart, soul, and body to the transcendent. That's the full path. And that's what he describes. He describes that moment of birth, the supreme birth, when you're simultaneously in total divine consciousness and totally burning with ecstasy in every cell of your body. First, the transcendent ecstasy, when I sit in the heart of his world. 1,000,000 suns blaze with light. The whole of the cosmos blazes with the light of 100,000 million suns. This is what happens when the Sahasrara opens, and you see that the whole cosmos is a creation of this burning, brilliant light. And everything then that you've ever lived before falls away. All the stains of suffering, all the long thousands and thousands and thousands of incarnations that you've lived, where you've suffered and betrayed and been guilty and suffered agonies of death and pain and remorse, they all go because you're a new creature, a new species. And then you hear the divine music, the music that's creating all of the cosmos all the time. The vibrational, ecstatic music, which mystics hear. I've heard it. Many people have heard it. It's music of a beauty beyond anything that any words can describe. Beyond Beethoven, beyond Bach, beyond anyone. It's ecstatic and gorgeous beyond anything that can be imagined. Listen to the unstruck bells and drums. Love is here. Not in heaven, not in some other state which you have to sweat on one leg in the Himalayas for, but right here, right now, if only you are right here, right now, with it, in it, as a part of it. Rains pour down without water. Rivers are streams of light. How could I ever express how blessed I feel to revel in such vast ecstasy in my own body? So let's go to number 2. And this is the path to this. This is what you have to be brave enough to let happen to you. Kabir drank in avidly the nectar of God's love. And the well-baked pot will never again be turned on the potter's wheel. The wine of the beloved's love becomes more ravishing the more you drink it, but it is hard to buy, for the wine seller demands your head in exchange. Many throng around the wine merchant's stall. He drinks his fill who offers his head. The rest get turned away, dry and empty. You are truly drunk with the beloved's wine, whose bliss never changes, when you roam like a mad elephant, forgetful of yourself. The bliss-drunk elephant forfeits its usual grass, for the arrow of love burns within his heart. He's chained to the gate of love and throws dust on his own head. The drunken one is absorbed in one unknown. He has overcome desire, soared free of anxiety, and under the spell of love's wine, he transcends while in a body, the stage of liberation. Kabir exhausted many yogic alchemies, but found none like the Lord's love. If even one drop enters your body, your whole being turns to gold. That's the poem of the path. And he makes it absolutely clear what this path demands. It demands that you do everything you possibly can to die while you're alive into life itself. Because as long as you're trapped in the consciousness of the false self that belongs to this species, you can never be born into the miraculous divine embodied presence of the next species. Many throng around the wine merchant's store, but he drinks his fill. The only person who gets to drink this transfiguring wine is the person who's both mad and sane enough, who believes enough, who's passionate enough, who has the deepest possible insanely passionate faith enough to cut off his head and offer it to the beloved, to go beyond anything you've ever dreamed, anything you've ever imagined, anything you've ever read, anything you've ever believed, anything you've ever experienced, again and again and again and again. Because anything that you concretize as God is going to limit the infinitely miraculous powers of God, and only the one who finally just cuts off that whole concretizing capacity will be able to be given more and more and more and more and more. Because when you cut off your head, there's a direct empty channel in the middle of you, and God just pours the wine in. So now to the third poem. And I love the wild music from outside. Kabir would love it too. This is the moment of the recognition of this amazing, terrifying process really working. And it begins by the line that describes our time. And Kabir is coming back at this time, right now, to say to us, stop whining and stop being in despair. Stop being so paralyzed and stop going after the false mysticisms. Stop trying to use God to manifest Maseratis and Lamborghinis. Stop following the false gurus. Stop believing in the limitations of the old religions and start burning with real, authentic faith and love, and you will be transfigured if you really dare. So this is the poem. Love's hurricane has come. The whirlwind of knowledge has arrived. My thatched roof of delusion has been flung to the four directions. My hut of illusion, so carefully crafted, has come careening down. Its two posts of duality have crashed to the ground. Its rafters of desire have been split by lightning. Thunderbolts have collapsed all its eaves of greed. Its big stone jar of evil habits has smashed in a million pieces. With contemplation and clear devotion, the holy ones have rebuilt my roof. It is strong and unmoving now, and never leaks or drips. When lies and deceit ran out of my body's house, I realized the Lord in all his splendor. Rain came down in torrents. After the wild storm, torrents of divine love drenched me, body and soul. Then, O Kabir, the sun soared out, the sun of glory, the sun of realization, and darkness dissolved forever. And I'm going to end, before we're all lying annihilated at the feet of truth, by this incredible poem which really describes, as far as words can go, what the embodied divine human life is like. Remember, I read those two texts from the Vedas, and they give a tremendous clue when they say that what happens is that you find the sun in the rock, in the cells, and then you see totally. Your whole body becomes eyes, experiencing past, future, everything around. All of your senses become awake to the unified quantum force field of naked oneness. But what the genius of this poem is that it takes all of this ecstatic grandeur and grounds it in extraordinary, ordinary experience. Because Kabir wasn't a guru, he was something so much more important than a guru. He didn't live surrounded by disciples buying him Rolls Royces. He lived as a poor weaver all his life, living an ordinary, amazing life to show everyone, every sweeper, every prostitute, every king, every engineer, every guy selling chai, that he wasn't special, that what had happened to him and in him could happen to everyone. Like Jesus, he's a liberator, not the founder of some boring new religion. He's the sign to every human being of the glory that is waiting to be discovered in them, the treasure that's awaiting to be uncovered and awoken in the rock. And that's why these poems were incorporated not only into thousands and thousands of singers' repertoires. A whole group of Kabir singers started to sweep India singing these songs. 300 of them were incorporated into the core of the Sikh corpus, the Sikh scriptures. And these songs have been adored by the greatest saints, the greatest philosophers, but it's not them who really get it. I tell you who really gets it. It's the sweepers and the cigarette sellers who sing Kabir, because he's the one that gives them the guts to live the divine life in shame and poverty and humiliation, and to keep their love burning and their pride, their divine pride, high. And my greatest transmission of Kabir didn't come from a philosopher or a saint. It came from the woman who lives in the shop around the corner from this amazing place. And one day, she's my favorite person in Banaras, and she sells soap and toothpaste. So I always go and buy far more soap and far more toothpaste than I will need for a lifetime from her, because I just love this woman. For this particular afternoon when I bought my first heap of soap, and she said, "You look like a nice person." And I said, "Well, I hope I am a nice person, because it would have been a terrible waste of a life if I wasn't a nice person." She said, "Do you want to know something?" And I said, "I'd love to know something." And then she sang Kabir. And she took these words of Kabir and she said to me, "Everything is God. I'm God, you're God. God is not just living in some other world. God is right here, right now, and it's living in us. And it's not just in our minds, it's not just in our hearts, it's in the body. The body is also God. And I'm living as this poor woman selling toothpaste and soap, but I don't care, I don't mind, I know what's happening in me, and I am filled with joy and gratitude." The ordinary, extraordinary people get it, the intellectuals quibble, and the saints are jealous. So here is the poem of that woman. Seeker, the simple union is the best. What Kabir means is no fancy practices, no Sanskrit names, no gorgeous clerical clothes, no hierarchies. Just be you with you. Your small you immersed in the glory of your big you, quite naturally hanging out with you in you. Seeker, the simple union's the best. Since the day when I met him, there has been no end to the joy of our love. I don't shut my eyes. I don't close my ears. I don't mortify my body. I don't mortify my body. Kabir's agreeing. I see with open eyes and smile and see his beauty everywhere. I say his name, and whatever I see, it reveals him. Whatever I do, it becomes his worship. Rising, setting are both one to me. All contradictions have vanished. Wherever I go, I move around him. Everything I do is service to him. When I lie down, I lie prostrate at his feet. He is the only one I adore. There is no other. My tongue has abandoned all impure words and sings his splendors day and night. And when I get up or sit down, I cannot forget him. The pulse of his music is always throbbing in my ears. Kabir says, my heart is ablaze. I unveil what is hidden in my soul. I am drowned in that one great bliss that transcends all joy and pain. He's a guy hanging out on the veranda of his small weaver's hut after a day's work, a day's hard work, in one of these alleys down here. And one night when I had finished these translations and came to Banaras to make this selection and beg him to fill my pitiful efforts with his grace, I was wandering about 3 o'clock in the morning down here, and I swear upon my mortal soul that it's true. And I turned in this big square and I saw a weaver sitting by candlelight weaving very calmly. And I just stood there and I looked at this amazing, calm, ordinary, extraordinary man weaving. And I didn't think twice about it, and I came back and slept. And then in the morning I thought, oh my God. And I ran through the gullies to find that square, and there was no weaver's shop in that square. So let's end with the 4 lines that are the key to the transfigured life, and then a prayer, which I'll say on behalf of all of us, because you're all such beautiful, ragged, wrecked, broken, whole, amazing, hungry, bewildered, despairing, hopeful people. You deserve both these lines and the prayer. That's the kind of material that the new species is going to be made out of. You're humble people, and you know you don't know. And that's fantastic, because if you think I know anything, you're wrong. I know this, but I know there is so much more to know. I'm not a guru. I would despise myself if I thought of myself as a guru, because the only thing that you know when you're on the real path is that in order to know anything more, you have to keep up a constant state of the humblest, unknowing knowing. Because as soon as you think you know anything, the process stops. You crystallize in that place. You can't grow except by being utterly empty in every moment of everything that you've experienced before that moment began. That's the condition of this great leap into a new reality. So I just want you to keep these lines in your heart. I don't shut my eyes. He's not playing yogi. You could see it all around. Kabir thought Banaras was the greatest load of fakes he'd ever seen, because he knew that it wasn't anything to do with any of this. It was to do with awakening, not playing some religious game in a religious costume with a Sanskrit name. It was being totally real, right? I don't shut my eyes. I don't close my ears. I don't indulge in any of those fancy theatrical yogic austerities. I don't mortify my body. I don't lie on beds of nails and beat myself up. I see with open eyes. Remember the Vedas. I see with open eyes and smile and see His beauty everywhere. Those, I hope, are the lines that describe the best of your experience in this gorgeous madness that is India. And so let me end what I have to offer you for the moment. God knows what's going to happen to this old ragamuffin, and I'll have something else for you later, but this is all I know now. So let me end with the prayer that is the second to last poem in this book. You're never going to get to this by knowledge. You're never going to get to this as an intellectual. You're never going to get to this thinking anything of yourself. You're only going to get transfigured by loving God madly by loving God with your whole being. That's the key. One drop of that love will turn you to gold. So the prayer that Kabir gives us is, let there be your love, Lord, burning softly in every cell of my dying and transfigured body. By your wild and merciful grace, Lord of truth, turn me to gold, so I can love in perfect fullness you who love in me. So let's just end by saying the name of God that Kabir loved so much. He said Ram. The practice that he gave humanity was not the 17 levels of emptiness. It was one practice. And he knew just how powerful it was. Just as the Vedic sages knew that if you take the mantra and you work with the mantra, you can split the mountain through the grace of God, and the new birth will come through. And he gave one word. Say that one word is Ram. But he has to be said with your whole being, with the whole of Banaras in you. It can't just be mechanical. It has to be what the Vedic sages also the cry. The cry to be liberated from this fatuous, hubristic species that we are now mired in, into another embodied divine being that is free and joyful and ordinary and extraordinary and humble and wild and creative and fun. So let's do it with that kind of humble, passionate sincerity that is India's greatest gift. Ram, 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 Ram. Thank you. Bless you. God bless you. Good night. Find the treasure in the rock, my friends.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank Eric. Thank Eric, who has been go and get some sleep, my friends. And if the treasure in the rock appears to you in the dream, please come and describe to us what it looks like.